Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest instalment in our Arthritis Fact Check series. So this is Starting Exercise Safely. So my name's Mark Williams. I'm the Services Manager for Arthritis Action, and I'm joined today by my colleague, David Vo. So David is the Therapies and Exercise Lead for Arthritis Action, as well as an osteopath and a leading voice in rehabilitation, aging, and resilience. And to top it all off, he's also the author of Stronger 10 Exercises for a Longer, Happier Life. Hello, David.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's good to be here. I understand we've got a lot of questions to get through that people have sent in.
We do. Yeah, fortunately, a bunch of our members have been really kind and sent a bunch of stuff. So it's not just us making these up, which is nice. It's nice to know what the people actually want to know as well. So I thought, the reason why we're doing this one in particular is because as it's January, as at the time of recording this anyway, a lot of people are starting to either get back into exercise after a bit of a break, or maybe it's even their first time ever of starting to get into exercise, and thought it's not always as straightforward as some might think. There's always a lot of stuff that maybe you hadn't thought about, and injuries happen. There's loads of different things that can come up when you start exercising after a break, or even for the first time. So it would be good to get a bit of guidance and get a few questions answered from someone of your qualifications and knowledge, David.
Sure, yeah, it's an important discussion, I think, because it's a classic thing to make a New Year's resolution and then go headlong into something. So yeah, hopefully we can give some timely information, answer some questions that might prevent some injuries happening.
Fingers crossed. And also, if any of you people watching it live as well have any questions, do feel free to put them in the chat. And if we have time, we'll answer as many of them as we can. But let's get started. But we'll start off with something nice and simple, I think. So what are some of the things that you think can lead to people being inactive?
Well, we know from our work in the work we do in Arthritis Action, people with musculoskeletal injuries, is often pain can be a bit of a showstopper. Often just a diagnosis of arthritis or arguably another medical condition can make you pause because of fear around making that condition worse. But certainly with something like osteoarthritis of the knee or the hip or the spine, then we know that fear of making things worse and thinking that more activity as opposed to less activity is better for that condition is often the main barrier that we find ourselves facing. And that fear leads to inactivity. That inactivity leads to more pain often, and that pain then will ironically lead to more fear and activity. So it's a bit of a doom loop people get into. But we try to come in and give suggestions of how to get active safely, which is, I guess, what this podcast or this Insta Live is about.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So I suppose let's follow on from that. What steps can people take to start gradually increasing the amount of activity or exercise they do?
In the initial stages, you've been inactive for a long time and your muscles and your body are detrained, then you have to listen to your body. And often we just say, just get a little bit more active, just in a general sense first. So you don't have to follow a program or join a gym or anything like that. You can just decide to do 10 minutes of walking a day or go to a pool. And you can even, if 10 minutes of walking on land you feel too much for you, then why not give that a go in the pool? We often find I send people from clinic all the time just to walk twice a week in the pool, obviously in your depth. But I just want to keep that kind of resistance against the water going. And that's often just a good way. People feel great when they get out of the pool. And that's a great first step. But as is walking for 10, 20 minutes, alternate days to when you're beginning, and then up to 20 minutes a day. And then when you can do that throughout every day, you can then start building on that. I recommend generally when people is very untrained or have been inactive to spend at least 6 weeks, 2 months doing that kind of thing, because that in itself is a great preparation for what comes next.
Definitely. I think a lot of people do start too fast too soon when they sort of come shooting out the gate, so to speak, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And I think the biggest thing, if you're middle-aged or you're older than middle-aged, is the main thing is not get injured, because an injury in midlife or older is, we all know probably from bitter experience, that you don't bounce back as quickly as you did when you were in your 20s. So it's the main thing is not to go too hard too soon, to be consistent, but not to buy into some of the soundbitey type information that's out there that says go hard or go home. Pain is weakness leaving the body. Actually, pain isn't that.
No.
That pain is a signal to potentially change what you're doing. even temporarily, even pain when you're sitting down in one position for too long. So don't ignore pain. But we can come to that later if you like.
Yeah, sure, definitely. As you mentioned walking, I know one thing that's especially, I definitely get asked a lot. I get asked this question quite often, actually. And it's how many steps a day should people be doing?
I mean, the messaging around the 10,000 steps a day has been very successful. Not necessarily, originally wasn't necessarily based in science, it was more sales, I think.
Mm.
But what we do know is that any movement around walking and just moving your joints in the day is a fantastic thing. So anything really that gets you moving consistently throughout the day, not just sat and your day being basically defined by being sat all day. Anything that gets you up and out of your seat regularly throughout the day is a good thing. What we do know from the evidence is that the health benefits of steps plateau after about 8,000 anyway. I'm not saying don't do your 10,000. What I am saying is that maybe if you are striving to do 10,000 plus, you can save a bit of time in that daily investment of time and consider other activities such as some strengthening activities, which I'm sure we'll come on to later.
Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning not to set that step count at an unrealistic goal either, just because if someone throws out the 10,000 steps to you, but you struggle to walk at all,
Yeah,
make sure you're setting it at a realistic amount as well for you individually.
as with any of the exercise advice and any of the kind of discussion we have tonight, the main thing is that not everyone is the same. And you're going to have a different body, a different history. You're going to have a different genetic inheritance, a different life that's led up to that. So the main thing is to listen to your body and understand what it's telling you. And again, I come back to the fact that if someone's starting to get more active, maybe in their 60s or 70s, you've got a lot of time. If this is something you want to keep doing over the next 10, 15, 20 years, look at it like that. Look at it not as a sprint, but as a marathon. And there's no rush to go too hard too soon. That's the main message in terms of deciding what to do. But the main thing is to make a start, and that start can be different for everyone. You can swim, you can walk, you can go to a health club and use the pool or some of the machines to get a bit more active in the first instance. And that's always a good starting point for people.
Excellent. So how can people progress from there, do you think? So they've started at this very introductory level to try and get themselves a bit used to it. Where can people go? What should the next step be?
So I think often the missing part of the pie is strength training. But prior to what you would probably recognize as strength training, so for instance, people doing press ups or squats, or people using gym machines or free weights, prior even to that, there's often a misstep, which I feel is important, especially in light of potentially the audience that we may have for this discussion. So people who are potentially in their 40s, 50s, 60s and up, the main thing we need to realize is if we do any resistance type training, resistance training being another way of saying strength training really, we often miss the fact that you're not just targeting your muscles, you're also targeting your bones, your ligaments and your tendons. And then we all know from midlife onwards that tendonitis is a real catastrophe if it happens to you, if you get an inflamed tendon. Now, if you do isometric exercises, which are the sorts of exercises you would have done if you ever went on a school ski trip, where you just hold a wall sit against the wall, a plank is an isometric one as well. Any position you hold in a static position under a little bit of resistance from your own body weight is absolute gold dust for those connective tissues, so for the ligaments and tendons. So if someone is getting generally more active and they've done their 6 weeks of getting more active generally, then I suggest they carry on that general activity for another 6 weeks and they do that kind of activity as well. So that in parallel to getting more generally active, they do some isometric exercises as well, which can be done over a course of a few minutes every day. They're perfect because when, for instance, when the kettle boils or you're on hold, for instance, to a utilities company, I often tell patients, and I practice this myself, that you hold an isometric position. Because why not? Otherwise, you're just sitting around getting angry because you're on hold. But actually, you can use that time in the day. It only takes a few minutes a day. But if you do that consistently, most days, over the course of a month to 6 weeks, then your ligaments and tendons will have had time to adapt to that. So the thing is with muscles and the way that they respond to training is they respond quicker. But you can then be left with a situation where you're progressing very quickly with strength, which often happens if you're quite new to it. And then suddenly you get a niggle You know, you can get a shoulder, elbow, or a knee or hip tendon or your Achilles tendon classically is slightly inflamed. And it's generally because you haven't done that isometric work, which specifically targets that tissue. So the good news is it's free, it's simple, it takes a few minutes every day, but that's where I'll be starting people. Classically, get a little bit more active. Then before you get very active or moderately active, you then do your strength component, which can be home-based, own bodyweight exercises. But prior to that, you're doing about 6 weeks of isometric holds, which is going to be protecting your joint stability, the ligaments and tendons. The ligaments being the end of the muscles, the tendons being the end of the muscles as they come in and attach to the bone, and the ligaments being the connective tissue that actually stabilizes the joint. And everyone would have heard of potentially an ACL, or that's the sort of structures we're talking about.
Great. I mean, do people need to go to the gym to get back into exercise as well?
And they can do, but as long as they don't go too fast too soon. I think there's nothing wrong with speaking to a qualified fitness professional who I'm sure will be talking about the same things. When you're talking to someone who's been very inactive for a long time, I don't think there's anything wrong in doing the first phase of that, if you're motivated to, with a friend, with a family member, just getting a bit more active throughout the day, choosing some of those activities we've already discussed, and then choosing some of those isometric things. I mean, on Arthritis Action website, we've also got a set of what we call movement snacks, and that would be perfect for getting someone who has been inactive out of their chair and being a bit more active during the normal day. And that's something that they can progress on and do as well. So no, to answer your question, you don't need to go to the gym. There's nothing wrong with going to the gym, but as long as you have it in your mind that steady as you go, don't rush in and then look around you and think, well, they're doing that, I can be doing that. It's your journey. I think you should listen to your body and take your time in the beginning phase, because ultimately we're talking about consistency, and you can't be consistent even with a few minutes a day if you're injured.
Absolutely. And I really like that point you made as well, which I definitely agree with, is try not to compare yourself to others, because I know that's something people in gyms especially do always sort of trip up on. You don't want to look weaker than the person next to you or anything like that. It might go too far to what you should be doing. Because I mean, everyone starts at a different point. So that's just where they are now. You might get there later on, or there's so many different factors involved.
Absolutely. And worse still, people often don't want to look silly by asking, what should I be doing here? They might get it and then subsequently do the wrong thing or do too much, and again pick up an injury. So the name of the game initially is to get a little bit more active initially without getting injured, and then build some strength into your connective tissues, your ligaments, your tendons, your bones even, and then you can progress on to whatever you want to progress on to. That would be the time I would be saying then you can go and work with a fitness professional and get a proper program put in place for you, because you've done the groundwork at that point.
Excellent. You kind of answered this one already, but you know, this was one of the questions we were given. So what are your thoughts on training to failure?
There's no need, absolutely no need to do it. And again, it's an ego-driven pursuit, I think, in many regards. I think when you're slightly older, you should reconsider what the term personal best means. And it doesn't matter if you are able to maximum bench press a certain figure and amount. That is completely irrelevant if your goal, frankly, is to be in really great shape at 80 and to be living independently in your 80s and 90s. The goal is not to get injured. And so therefore, there are many benefits to training within, well below your failure rate. And there's, I would say, arguably more benefits to keeping good form and to being controlled in the movements that you do. So if we're talking about a squat, I'd rather someone drop it down to 70% of what they can do and just do enough reps within a controlled environment. Again, I'm repeating myself here. I hear myself saying it again, but there is really no point in risking an injury, especially if you're enjoying it. If you're enjoying the feeling it gives you to be more active, to be playing tennis or to being in the gym or in that environment, then you want to keep doing it. And I think in terms of redefining what personal best means, keep turning up, frankly. So yeah, there's no need whatsoever for If you're a professional athlete, that's a different conversation, but we're not talking about that. But unfortunately, a lot of the narrative in gym culture and strengthening, or even running, actually, is always often driven by professional sports, because that's where the money and the investment is. And we learn a lot from them, but we also know, when we look at the figures around people just exercising for longevity, that there's no need to do that.
Absolutely. But how much exercise do you think should people be doing? I know this is a really tricky one, but if you could like give a sort of example.
Everyone's slightly different. And again, it depends upon your history, if you've got an injury, if you've got a hip or a knee that potentially might inflame around. So I think if you do too much, so everyone's going to have a slightly different dose of exercise. It's going to be ideal for them. What would be ideal for you is not going to be ideal for me, and therefore for anyone else. So what I push that back, I think the question is, are people able to interpret how they feel? Do people have the knowledge and the skill set in themselves to lean into what their body's telling them? Because there's a lot of wisdom in what your body tells you the day after an exercise session. I mean, in an ideal world, you're going to be doing something most days, but you're not going to be doing the same thing every day. That said, if the same thing every day is keeping you really happy and moving and strong, why isn't, that's great, but maybe not for everyone. So it's almost impossible to answer that. But what I would say is that the main thing is to listen to your body. When you wake up that morning, you might have thought you're going to go and do a strengthening session or a swim session, or maybe go out to play tennis or go for a long walk. If you wake up and you haven't slept and you feel really groggy, I really wouldn't recommend that session. I would go for an easier session. I'd go for a gentler walk. I'd go to the pool and do some stretching and swimming and go to the sauna. Tomorrow is another day. But what I would do is give myself the mindset, actually, and not put a figure on it. I think when you get to a certain age, you've got to give yourself permission almost to be middle-aged or older. And what that means is that just like eating healthy most of the time, we've all got that memo. We all know that most of the time I want to try and eat healthy. But we all know that it's very rare that people do. What usually happens is 80% of the time you eat healthy, 20% of the time you have a treat, you eat unhealthy, you have a takeaway, whatever it is. But as long as you come back to eating healthy most of the time, then generally you're going to be all right in that sense. And I like people to project the same mindset onto exercise and strength training, in that if most of the time you return to that, then you're going to be fine. If you have a week or even a month where life intervenes and you have a family issue, or you have a work deadline, or you're caring for parents or children, how are you going to do it? But as long as you think, okay, I'm going to come back to it though, and you do come back to a sensible framework that it doesn't injure you immediately when you come back, then you're going to be fine. Because what I try to put across to people is that we're talking about the next 20 years. We're not talking about getting in shape for a wedding or getting in shape for a holiday. We're talking about being in shape in your mid-80s and 90s. So as long as you think, I've got that message, I'm going to keep coming back to that, I'm going to find something that works for me, I'm going to keep coming back to it most of the time, then the future will take care of itself. And I think if more people adopted that mindset, I think a lot of the pressure and the guilt that comes with not turning up one day and thinking I'm a failure, oh God, I'm going to lose all the gains I've made. No, you're not going to, because you've got 20 years to play with. So, and that's, sometimes people buy in, but I wish more people did, because less people get injured and more people would come back to that really good stuff, which is the activity-based, simple strength training.
Excellent. Why do you think strength is important?
Well, I mean, as you probably know, mate, let's put it like this. Your step count alone won't save you in older age. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that steps aren't massively important for cardiovascular health, mobility, joint health, mental health, weight management. But activities like walking, running, swimming, cycling do not target our larger and more powerful fast twitch muscle fibers. So what we see is that people who are often very active, often can be elite endurance athletes, their body will be made up of mostly slow twitch muscle fiber. And that doesn't protect you from frailty in older life in the same way as if they've done their cardiovascular training, so their steps and their reps. So for protection against frailty in older age, you need your steps and reps. i.e. strength training. Because what strength does, strength communicates to your nervous system in a way that your steps or your kind of cardiovascular training doesn't do. It fires motor patterns. It literally sends messages to your deep nervous system that you're still using these muscles and you're still out there in life, saying yes to life. And you're doing stuff that is sometimes quite challenging, but you feel it's challenging because, you know, your muscles are burning and it's feeling quite uncomfortable. But that's not only that feeling, your nervous system is picking up on that. And your nervous system getting the message that I am a viable person here. I am still using my body and it's not going to detrain just now. And so you're putting off that fall off the cliff that we often see with people. You have relatives that sort of get old overnight. That's because suddenly, and it does happen quite quickly after 60, 65, you lose a much faster rate your fast twitch muscle fibers. So if you're not doing something to actually hold on to the ones you've got, then it's a double whammy. And that's potentially why. Now, the reason you asked me it's important is because not only do you get that neurological kind of deep messaging to your nervous system that all is well with the world, but you also get the skeletal muscle mass that's maintained and retained and preserved. Now, within that muscle mass are amino acids, proteins, and that basically is the housekeeping potential for all cellular activity. Skeletal muscle and skeletal muscle mass, if you've preserved it, helps you mop up inflammation, absorb glucose. It releases molecules into your bloodstream when you contract a muscle, which help you think clearly. It's like the ultimate medicine. It also acts as an immune organ, which is more relevant these days than it ever has been, in that there's a reason why the flu or a virus is very dangerous to an elderly person. It's because, generally speaking, they're not going to have the immune response they did as a younger person. And part of that, we think, is because they've also sacrificed a lot of their muscle mass, which we lose at an exponential rate from mid-30s onwards, unless you do something about it. So that's why working on strength and maintaining skeletal muscle, as well as your step count and therefore healthy weight, cardiovascular health, is the ultimate goal. Because if you're doing one, you're only doing half. So if I get an endurance athlete or someone who's very into counting steps, I'll pivot them towards a bit of both, and vice versa. If I've got someone who really enjoys going to the gym but doesn't really see the point of maybe playing tennis or bowls or rambling, I'll pivot them back. So you've got to meet in the middle and do both, and then you've got every chance of protecting yourself in older age.
Excellent. So, what do you think something that gets neglected when people start to exercise? You covered this a little bit already, but what do you think? Is there anything that people do neglect when they start?
Well, I think the main one we've covered off in that they don't think about strengthening the connective tissues before you enter into a proper increase in both cardiovascular or strength type activity. The other thing I think is often neglected, though, is sleep, actually. I think that without paying that respect, sleep hygiene and doing what you can to maximize the sleep you get, then your body won't recover. I mean, bodies are made not in a gym, but in the bedroom. Because if you do not prioritize sleep and recovery, the body responds to stress, so your cardiovascular system responds to you training it, as do your muscles. But that response is often done when you've relaxed and your body is in that state of relaxation, and sleep is the ultimate time to do that. It replenishes, restores, and responds to what you've done that day. So if you're up and down, or you're reading till late at night, or watching your screen and stimulating yourself, then even if you train like an athlete, you're only going to get so far. So I think sleep, as well as paying and giving respect to your connective tissues before you start. Yeah, but I think nutrition as well. I'm sure you can speak to Martin, our dietitian, on that to get a few more tips. But I think also paying attention, respect to, as long as you're eating healthy most of the time, that's good enough. Because as long as you're exercising most of the time, that's enough as well. Because I think you've got to be realistic in life.
Absolutely.
Unless you're a professional, you've got to live in the real world as well as have these things on your mind that you've got to manage.
Definitely. One thing we haven't spoken about yet, actually, is we have the question, is it true that impact is good for your bones?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's essential for your bones because the bones themselves respond to impact. Sensors in the bone sense that and then lay down thicker bone. Sometimes that's tricky if you've got someone with osteopenia, osteoporosis, saying go out and get some impact because they think, well, really? And so that's another advantage. Not that they can't, but it has to be quite a prescribed, controlled way of doing it. But one of the advantages of a progressive program of strengthening exercises is that you can get a really nice strengthening effect on the bone without the impact. So someone who's osteopenic or osteoporotic can improve their bone density. And the beautiful thing about strength training is that you get a specialized sensor in the bone that responds to the compressive forces of lifting something or holding something. And when you release it, it will sense that that load is gone. And what that does is lays down more bone around the area where that stress was felt. What exercise with strength also does is it lays down beautiful lines in the bones. So I'll give you an example of the femur. So everyone's heard where people fall and the head of the femur fractures. And often if you look at anatomical pictures of that, someone who's been very inactive in life, who's fallen and that neck is broken, they've only got very linear lines in the bone. So in the bone you have these lines that really dictate and actually demonstrate how you've lived. So if you've only ever done one thing, like you've only ever done walking and then you fall and your hip is a bit weak or osteoporotic and it breaks, you can kind of predict it. Whereas if someone's had a rich menu of exercise and activity, tennis, bowls, walking, strength training, swimming, then their bone lines will be these beautiful kind of spiraling circles around, very artistic looking in a way, very architectural, which is what they are. It's nature's architecture in real time. So, and it's a real time demonstration of your body. You'll get the body that basically it will be defined by how you've moved it in life. And so the more you can do to vary movement, the more you can do to do both impact and a bit of strength, then those bones are going to be in really good shape.
Excellent.
So just to summarize, it's similar to getting your steps and reps for longevity, but we're talking about bone health specifically, steps and reps again. That's the perfect recipe. Healthy diet, getting some steps for impact, and getting your strength training done for the rep compression aspect, and you're going to get healthy bones.
Excellent. Love it. So let's see if we've got any other questions coming in. We've talked about how people can have to listen to their body and when they figure out how much is too much exercise and things like that. When it comes to arthritis as well, if you've got arthritis in a certain area, how do you tell when too much is too much for that? Because you know you should be exercising it, but what's the point where you need to stop when you have an arthritic joint?
Yeah, that does come from experience and a bit of knowledge of your own body, how it responds. What I would say to someone is if they wake up in the morning and their joint in question is swollen, have an easy day. Have an easy couple of days. Maybe do some mobility, work on your core. Sometimes going on a bike to cycle the knee through on no resistance can really help that as well. So change your plans, be flexible with it. I always say in the mornings as well, if you've been doing some strength and you haven't been doing strength or hadn't done it before, then you can get something called delayed onset muscle soreness, it's called DOMS, but it's basically your body's response, which is not a bad thing to the thing you've done the day before or even 2 days before. As a rough rule of thumb, if you wake up and you're hobbling around and you're struggling to walk, then don't do too much that day. But if it's below a 3 out, if it's a 1 to 2 out of 10, a bit of awareness, a bit of stiffness, you can still do something. But listen to your body and lean into the wisdom of it, because you don't want to choose to say, oh, I'm going to ignore that and do a more challenging session that day and then injure yourself because your body hasn't recovered. So have you slept that night? If good, yes, tick that box. How are you feeling? Are you really stiff and hobbling around? Then don't tick the box. But if you feel a bit aware of the body part you've exercised with, but you feel okay, then give it a go. But there's no shame also in stopping halfway if you're just not feeling it. The main thing is to exercise and push yourself when you're feeling good. and when you're feeling free in terms of your body movement. If you've got an arthritic joint, you've got to be realistic, I think, and you're not going to be doing stuff that you're doing when you're 25, but as long as you can find something to do, and that's where often I say, if you've got a leisure centre locally, use the water. Water is your friend at this point, because half an hour walking up and down, or some gentle swimming, maybe with some floats that can kind of improve your swim posture, that can be gold dust. Nice sauna to relax and then get on with your day. You're still moving, and you're not going to lose your cardiovascular fitness or your strength overnight for the sake of a week or 10 days where you're a little bit less active because you've had a flare up. It's not a disaster. You can reset and come back, and that's the main thing to take away, I think, is that yeah, it's more challenging for people who have arthritis, 100%, but you can reset, and if as long as you keep coming back, my money's on them, because that's the golden ticket there. If you can just get some way of being consistent within your own body's limitations, then you're going to win.
Excellent. Perfect. So last question for you then for today. So if you could give me your 3 simple rules for exercise, what would they be?
I think the first one's got to be about mindset and overcoming any fear or anxiety, hesitancy around starting, especially strength training, because I'm a big advocate for that being one of the main missing parts for the majority of people I work with. Just bear in mind, it's never too late to get a little bit stronger. It's never too late. Even into advanced older age, you can always get a bit stronger. As long as you find a way of doing it safely, it's doable. So do not think it's too late for you. Do not think it's not worth it. It is. I think the other things, I guess if I've got 3 things to say, the other 2 non-negotiables are work on your legs. So you can do isometric stuff if you've got knees that are affected by arthritis, which are the static holds, or you can do lunges and squats, because your legs, put it like this, your legs are often one of the deciding factors in whether you can remain living independently or not in older age, getting off the toilet, going up and downstairs, in and out of the house. And our leg muscles detrain at a faster rate than the muscles of our upper body. So if you're deciding what to do that day and you're not sure what to do legs. You know, weighing up whether to do chest or shoulders or legs, do legs, I think. And I think the other thing to say is the other common deciding factor whether someone can continue to live independently is your grip strength. Grip strength is by far one of the most accurate predictors of long-term health. So someone in midlife with good grip levels will have statistically higher chances of having better independence, better heart health, better musculoskeletal health in older age. And because it's a proxy, grip strength is a proxy for whole body strength. It also sends out all important message, I think, to your nervous system that you're a viable person and that it's not time to detrain yet. So I think simple things with grip, squeezing a tennis ball or getting a towel, rolling it up, squeezing it like you're needing water out of it for a few minutes a day can be great. I've got other patients who load up suitcases at home and just stand with them with straight arms. That's called a farmer's lift and a farmer's carry. That's probably one of the best exercises out there for building whole body strength, and you can do that from home. Other people use the wheelbarrow. They load a wheelbarrow and lift it and stand with it. And again, fantastic for grip strength, and then engaging your whole body, which is also fantastic for avoiding falls, because the thing I missed in saying about leg strength, one of the biggest causes of death through falling, through injury through falling, so one of the biggest causes of death through injury is falling globally. And it's not just about doing your balance exercises. So what happens when you step off a curb is that it's not just about trying to grab something quickly, it's about your thigh muscles' ability to decelerate that fall, to give you a chance to reposition a foot or to grab something, but also just to slow the fall, to actually create upward pressure as you go down so that you're not hitting the ground too hard. The other great thing, I mean, the things about thigh strength is it can't prevent every fall, but if you do find falling, you're going to be potentially strong enough to get up, and your bones will be stronger and so less likely to break. So it's a win-win. So yeah, so to summarize, it's never too late. Keep your grip strength and keep your legs strong. And if you get that mindset, though, if you start with those 3 areas, so mindset, grip and legs, everything else will come from that. You can engage the services of a personal trainer, speak to a fitness professional, do your own thing at home, whatever you want to do.
Perfect. Thank you very much, David. That's been great. And yeah, if you like any of you watching or any of you watching this back later on, if you'd like any more information on any of the stuff that David's talked about tonight, please do visit our website, which is www.arthritissection.org.uk. And there you can also sign up to our Movement Snacks program as well. So if you are after just getting back into exercise and doing a few bits of snacking, as we talked about earlier on, perfect place to do it. We'll guide you through that as well. So thank you very much, David. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Mark. It's been fun. And yeah, I hope everyone gets something out of that. And thanks for the question.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate it.